I became a high school biology teacher at the age of 19. I wish it was one of those stories where I just boldly walked into a classroom and let people assume I was their substitute teacher, like in the movie Catch Me If You Can, you know? But nah, I was just a nerd who really loved biology and really hated the fact that everyone around me back in my home country, Bangladesh, thought it was all about memorizing. But I really hoped people would see the beauty, the elegance in the biological world, because that used to just take my breath away. So, when my school couldn't find a biology teacher, and trust me, after making a lot of calls, they finally called me. Their recent high school graduate, or probably the only person they knew with a neuron poster over their bed, but they offered me a trial shot. They said, show up wearing a sari, because that's what you have to wear when you teach, and we will see if it works out. So I did. I prepared all weekend, had my entire lecture flow ready, and I showed up wearing a sari, just like this one, and I taught a class. And my students loved me. And guess what? I got the job. It was absolutely surreal, because I got to teach all day, every day. Like every morning, I got to get up there and talk about the ingenious way our heart worked, or how elegant was natural selection and evolution. And I could see that the passion was reciprocated by my students, who no longer feared biology, but they were truly starting to understand and appreciate it. The administration was shocked as well, because the average scores of the class increased from around 70% to 90% within just 2 months. My students, as the kids call it these days, were killing it. But I wasn't done with just grade improvement. I want to teach more. Being a National Biology Olympiad champion myself, I wanted my students to win those competitions. I wanted to teach the additional course human biology, which was not taught at school at that time because they didn't have the teachers for it. So I went to the admin. I had a tiny pitch ready. I said, the students are really enjoying the way I'm teaching. They're starting to really love biology. Can I please have more class offerings? They said no. They didn't want to give more responsibility to a child. After all, I was only 19. So I went to the roof and I cried, like a child, I guess. But as the bell rang for the next period, I wiped up my tears, I went to my class, and I taught. And after teaching, I was left with a sense of clarity. This was what I was good at. This was how I was making an impact in the lives of my 60 students, so I had to find a way to do more. That's when I decided I wanted to start my own coaching or tutoring center, where I could teach the things I wanted to and that would help my students. My students all signed up, so did students from other schools who had only heard of me. But being a girl from a minority community in Bangladesh, a place where random sexual harassment and assault on women happen every day on the street, unfortunately, my parents never really let me go out much. So they didn't feel comfortable letting me start a tutoring center outside by myself. So my mother and I actually turned our living room into a classroom where we could accommodate exactly 17 students at a time. And that's where I started teaching, all day, every day, in multiple batches of students. I called it Bioland. And I continued teaching at Bioland even after starting my undergrad. So even though I was studying in Singapore and Australia, I would go back home to Bangladesh and just teach all day. Running my business and teaching from that living room was when I felt most fulfilled. And over the years, my students did absolutely amazing. They received a total of 72 A stars, 17 A's, and even a world highest in the O-level and A-level biology exam. They received multiple medals in the National Biology Olympiad. our notes became so popular, they were actually being sold illegally in the bookstores of Dhaka. But most importantly, I think it's the fact that my students are now in colleges, some are studying biosciences, and they're so passionate about making a difference in this world. That's what makes me feel most proud. You see, most people don't consider teaching until the end of their career when they have already acquired the knowledge of their lifetime. But my life was flipped. I started my career with teaching, and teaching became an integral part of my identity. It influenced everything I am and everything I've done ever since. I became the first Schwarzman Scholar from Bangladesh due to the success of Bioland and my students. After completing undergrad at University of Melbourne and master's at Tsinghua University in China, I finally came here to Boston for MBA at this wonderful institution, Northeastern. Here, I was also fortunate enough to receive the Women Who Empower Innovator Award for my work at Bioland. So you see, no matter where I go or what I do, I am still thinking about teaching and Bioland. So I'm still thinking about making biology seem easy and beautiful to other people. So I want others to teach in that manner as well. So I started thinking about how to train young people to teach in a way that they would make biology seem interesting. And as I thought back to the last 7 years of teaching, I realized there were mainly 3 things that I followed that truly made me confident as a teacher. And today, I wanted to share those 3 things with you. So I wanted to teach because I wanted students to find biology interesting instead of intimidating. And in order to do that, I needed to understand, why did they find it intimidating? Why did they choose to memorize biology? So before I started teaching, and even in the early days of teaching, I was TAing for multiple teachers, from chemistry, biology, math, you name it. Sometimes I was grading over 200 to 300 exam scripts a day. And while I was severely sleep deprived and paid almost nothing, this was actually crucial. Because going through hundreds and thousands of student writings helped me realize how they thought. What were the key mistakes they were making? What were the key issues that they were facing? And that's when I realized that students tend to memorize biology because they didn't know exactly what to answer in any question. So they would just word vomit on the paper. And that's what I wanted to counter with my system of answering in bullet points, or just thinking about in bullet points. And that helped them to realize that answers could be done more succinctly and to the point. And that really helped my students. Another reason I realized that students tend to memorize biology is because they didn't find it relatable at all, which was pretty odd to me, because biology is all around us. It explains everything, from why we look like our parents to why I wasn't hungry this morning because I was so stressed about this talk. It explains everything. So when students are shown how the textbook concepts actually translate and connect to the real-life experiences we have every day, that's when they really start to appreciate the beauty of biology. The second thing that helped me become a better teacher was stage time. Being a teacher is almost like being a stand-up comedian. You write your joke set list before your every show. You watch the other great comedians. But most importantly, you get up on that stage every single day. And that's exactly how teaching was. I would work on my lecture script before every class I have. I would watch YouTube videos of the great Professor Eric Ladner from MIT, who would tell stories of genes and inheritance like they're fairy tales. But most importantly, I would teach every single day. Every tutoring session, every extra class, I would take up on it. And that made me a more confident person in general, because the person I used to be back in high school was very different to the person you're seeing here today. Because if she was supposed to give this talk, she would be terrified and shaking, and there would probably be a Debpriya-shaped hole on that wall behind you. But teaching in front of a classroom full of students helped me become a more confident person. I also started to realize that I was teaching better in a large group of students than even just one-on-one, because I was feeding off from the energy of the crowd, right? Simply by social facilitation, which is a concept where people perform better in front of other people compared to even just alone, just because they had a lot of practice doing the same thing. But with a lot of practice of doing the same thing came a new fear. A few months into teaching, I was visiting my old chemistry teacher at his coaching center. I caught a brief glimpse of him teaching the same equations that he taught us when I was a student. I started envisioning myself in his position as I might be a few years down the road, and immediately felt this chill down my spine. I felt terrified at the thought of giving the same lectures in the same manner just to different cohorts of students who would graduate, move on, while I welcome the new cohort and start from scratch. Is that what it meant to be a real teacher? Just perfect a recipe and cook it over and over again for different guests? As I continued teaching, I realized that wasn't really true. It wasn't a fixed recipe at all. Over time, I started to understand the different students better and started to customize my lectures for the different needs of my students. And that brings us to the third thing: being adaptable and learning to customize. So the more you teach, the more you would learn the different tricks that might work in different settings. So for example, when I teach my students in Bangladesh, I realized that if I stress the important points by once saying it in English and then repeating it in Bengali, that really helped to reinforce memory of those important points. If some students struggle to focus or loses focus very easily, I made sure that I make extra eye contact with them or even have them repeat contact back to me. Some students wanted to make biology seem easy and digestible. Others wanted to learn beyond their high school syllabus. For them, I had to create extra material and recommend scientific papers to encourage their interest in biology. Different students had different needs and levels of interest. And just like the variation in our gene pools, there were variation in my students. And if biology has taught us anything, it's that variation is beautiful and crucial for evolution. It's while learning to deal with variation, I learned not only to cater to the different needs of my students, but just to grow as a teacher beyond teaching high school biology. I tutored hundreds of students at University of Melbourne from courses on biochemistry, physiology, neuroscience. I even got to tutor here at Northeastern for financial management just last year. So you see, no matter what I teach, I was able to apply the same 3 key principles whenever I start a new teaching journey. Identifying the key issues that's troubling my students and solving it for them, teach every day, and customize my teaching to cater to the different needs of my students. As you could probably tell by now, I'm very passionate about teaching. And thus I do get asked quite often, Debpriya, do you want to become a professor? I don't know. I don't know if I want to become a professor. At a particular point in my life, I thought I would be teaching high school students forever. I remember this one evening when I was a freshman in college. I sat down with my mother and I was trying to convince her, my South Asian mother, to let me drop out of college so I could continue teaching high school students. I was kind of disappointed she shot down that idea, but eventually I was glad, because over the years, I got to learn so many new things, and I got to teach so many new things. So I don't know if I'm going to be a professor, but I know that I will continue to teach in some form or the other for the rest of my life. Be that financial management or neuroscience or astrophysics, I will continue teaching as it will be a part of my lifestyle. And I think we all need that healthy dose of something we're passionate about, even though we're not meant to pursue it in the traditional idea of a career. So, if there's one thing to take away from my story, I hope it is that you feel inspired to teach. Because even if you do it for a brief period of time, you might be making a huge impact in somebody else's life forever. I recently realized that when I was visiting my students at Mount Holyoke College, one of whom is actually sitting here today somewhere, and they were showing me around their research labs, and we ran into some of their classmates, and I was trying to introduce myself. I was saying, hi, I'm Debpriya. I used to be their high school biology teacher. And one of them stopped me. She said, we know who you are. Your student talks about you all the time. She says, you're the reason she's so passionate about biology. That was one of the most fulfilling moments of my life. The thing I wanted to achieve as a teenager, the small dream of making my students fall in love with biology, that in fact happened. In that moment, my entire life made just way more sense. In that moment, I cannot tell you how grateful I felt to have received that phone call to teach when I was 19. Thank you.